Friend Flicka by Mary O'Hara. Chapter 20. Everybody went out to see Flicka right after breakfast, and she stood against the fence as far away from them as she could get, while they discussed her injuries and her points, and whether she was more like Banner or Rocket. Every remark made about her went through Ken as if it had been made about himself, But he too wanted to get a verdict and said, "She's got wonderful points, hasn't she, Dad?" McLachlan glared at Ken. "You've bought her, Ken. She's signed, sealed and delivered. Always choose them first, set your heart on them, buy them, and study their points afterwards. That way you'll be a first-rate horseman." Ken's face got red and he looked away. Flicka, as if she felt the shame of her position, urged herself weakly along the fence in one direction, then turned and went in the other, trying to escape. "I think she's a perfect little beauty," said Nell, who was there in her riding clothes, ready to give Rumba her workout. "I want her moved down to the calf pasture," said McLachlan. "There's shade there, and grass, and the running stream of water. I'll be needing this pasture for the other horses." "But the calf pasture's got only 3 strands of barbed wire," said Ken uneasily. "She might jump it and get away." His father cast him one of his withering glances. "She won't jump it, Ken. She won't jump anything. Not for a long time yet." "Besides," said Howard, "down there she'll have company. The calves are now colts with their mothers. She won't be alone." "She'll be alone, all right," said McLachlan with a short laugh, and Ken remembered the remark about a loco horse always being a lone wolf. She'll keep to herself. Nell and Ross went down to the stable to begin the work on the polo ponies, and the rest of them spread out in a fan behind Flicka and gently urged her towards the gate which Gus had opened into the calf pasture. She went a few steps at a time, then stopped to rest with her head hanging weakly. McLachlan looked angrier than ever. Finally she was in the calf pasture, and the gate was closed after her. Gus and Tim went off to their work, and McLachlan said, "Come on, Howard, no use standing here looking at a sick horse all day." Ken was glad she was in the calf pasture. It was here the boys trained their colts. Here the milch cows grazed at night, and the calves in the daytime, and it was near the house. From the green, from the terrace, from Ken's window, a great deal of the calf pasture could be seen, and it comforted Ken to think that Flicka was close by, even when he couldn't be with her. When the sun grew hot that first day, she made her way with slow, tremulous steps to the shade under the 3 pine trees that stood in a row on the hill. She hadn't yet gone down to the brook. It would be too far for her, Ken thought, so he carried the tub into the calf pasture and filled it with fresh water, and set the feed box with a measure of oats beside it. Food and water, sun and shade, all within a few feet of each other. She barely touched the oats, blew out more than she took in, and didn't graze at all. Ken thought that perhaps it hurt her to move about, grazing. He must ask his father for hay. After dinner, the men were loading the 4 rodeo horses, Lady, Calico, Baldy and Buck, into the truck for McLachlan to drive into Cheyenne. Ken hurried to catch his father before the truck started, and found him in the cab. "Dad?" McLachlan looked down. "Well?" he barked. "Could I have a few forkfuls of hay for Flicka? She doesn't graze. I think she can't move around much." Being asked for hay was like being asked for his right eye. McLachlan's rule was, never feed hay when there's green grass growing. He roared. "I told you you cost me money every time you turn around." "Could I, Dad?" repeated Ken unflinchingly. "All right," said McLachlan, "just for a few days." He leaned out the window of the truck, shouting for Gus, and Ken dashed away. "All set, boss," said Gus, coming around from the back of the truck. He got in beside McLachlan, and the truck started off, with the horses prancing uneasily at first, but soon settling down to enjoyment of the ride, with their heads peeping over the high sides, looking curiously at the moving panorama. Ken carried the hay out to Flicka on a pitchfork. Every step he took for her was a joy. When Flicka saw him coming, she tried to run away, and Ken said, "Oh no, Flicka, don't run away. Don't be afraid of me. I am Ken, and this is hay. You like it, Flicka? Come and get some hay." He stood some distance off, having placed the hay near the tub of water, and presently Flicka came limping back, smelled at it, and began to eat. Ken lay with his elbow on the ground and his head propped on his hand, looking at Flicka. Now and then she would raise her head and look back at him, munching. She was getting a little bit used to him. He knew she was better. Her wounds were not bleeding today. They were swollen, and where the flesh had been pink and wet yesterday, today it was darker and dry. The scabs were forming. Howard was doing his colts for him today too. Ken hated to leave Flicka even for an hour. At milking time, Tim went down to the cow barn carrying the milk pails. The bronco buster, as usual, was with him, walking stiffly on his high heels, his thin legs in their pale blue jeans so bowed that a dog could have run through them. They made a detour into the calf pasture to take a look at the filly. "I'll be doggoned," said Ross calmly, with no expression at all on his small face. "She's beginning to look right pert." He sat down on a rock, took out his cigarette papers and a bag of Bull Durham, and expertly rolled himself a cigarette. Tim stood there with 2 milk pails on each arm, and the usual surprised grin on his comical Irish face. "Well, Kenny," he said, "how do you like trained nursing?" "All right," said Ken, shamefacedly. "When I seen her go for that fence," continued Tim, "I didn't really believe she'd try it. Then I says to myself, crazy people you seein' lock up in asylums, crazy horses you gotta let kill themselves." Ken slowly lifted his head and stared at Tim's dark, red, grinning face. Suddenly, all the odds and ends of thought which had confused him came clear in his mind. Loco. It wasn't just loco, the way you said, "Oh, you're nuts." It meant wrong in the head. Lunatic asylums, crazy people. Flicka wasn't right. Horror went through him like zigzags of lightning. "She sure is a wild woman," said Ross seriously. Ken looked from Tim to Ross. "Do you think she's really—" The word that had always been so easy to say now stuck in his throat. He brought it out with difficulty. "Loco?" "Sure she is. Did you ever break a loco horse, Ross?" "Well, now and then I get an outlaw handed me to break." "What do you do?" "Break it if I can." The bronco buster flipped away the butt of his cigarette and rolled himself another. "Last spring I had an outlaw to break. Never worked harder with a horse in my life. But I didn't lick him, he licked me. Just plumb wore me out." "Where was he?" "Jock Healy. Got me to go down with him to a ranch where he'd bought a horse. Said I could break it out and ride it home through the Badlands. I ought to known better. He talked me into it. Got down there, found a wild 10-year-old bronc, never been ridden. Jock, he'd always pass up a real good horse, by the worst and the oldest. When you get broke, if you do, you ain't got nothing. Well, I worked with him for 3 days straight. Got him so's I could ride him some. We started home through the Badlands. He'd get to turnin', gold darn if I could make him go straight. And I lost my sense of direction, 'cause when the sun set is set in the east. Yes, sir, I was turned plumb around and head back where I come from. Well, I tied the bronc up to a tree and lay down and went to sleep. In the morning I tried it again, but he'd turn and turn till I was dizzy. Couldn't make him go straight nohow. Beat him till my arm give out. I quit him at last, left him go, and hoofed it to the nearest town with my saddle on my head. Now and again I see Jock, and he tells me I owe him a bronc. I tell him I owe him a good bit less than nothing." "Could you break a filly like this?" "Well, if I was a breaking her, I'd not give her no oats, not much of anything till she was broke. Your dad now, He makes me feed these broncs oats while I'm working with them. That makes them too spooky and lively. I'd have had 'em broke long before this if he'd let me lay off the feed. With her, I'd get her weak-like, and tie up her feet so she couldn't run, and sack her out till she was wore out falling down and getting up. Then get on her back and give her the quirt. That way you can get a horse to knuckle under. But Ken, you have to keep it up so long when they're loco, or a real outlaw, and treat 'em so mean that there ain't much left when you get through with 'em. 'Tain't worth it. Ken hardly knew when they left. The doors of the airtight compartments in his mind had opened up, and the events of the past fortnight unrolled like a piece of film. The bronco jumping out of the truck, rolling down the hill, the crack of the Winchester that sent it to its knees in the grass, Rocket going down the hole, the sound she made when she hit bottom like a muffled bass drum, plunk. Before that, when she reared up in the truck and brained herself against the sign, when she fought in the chute and almost put out his father's eye, loco, loco. But he remembered Banner too, and that made him feel worse than when he remembered Rocket. Banner, and how the officers had cheered, and his mother had cried, all his flags flying. Flicka ought to be running on the upland too, her flags flying in the wind, golden and beautiful like Banner. Not the whole. If he could have undone it all then, and put her back on the range, free and alone, he would have. It's the end of chapter 20.